All right, welcome back, everyone. It's another episode of the TED Talk, another not interview, but a continuation of the podcast series. In case you didn't know, now we're making a difference between the two, right? We've got the blue original layout, I guess, for the podcast section, and then we've got the black and white for the interviews. But we're back with another one, and we're back with a new guest, which is always a nice thing to have on the channel. We're back with Dinko. In case you've been living under a rock and you don't know, he happens to occasionally be casting some of the biggest events in the world of Counter-Strike. But yeah, coming in live from a hotel room in Bucharest. How are you doing, man? Thanks for coming.
Yeah, good. Thank you for having me on, Ted. Yeah, I was sitting in the hotel room, so it's I tied it up a little bit best I could. I now see a can over to the other side. I wish I tied it up a little bit more for you, but yeah, it's good to be out here.
No, we're getting the premium treatment. In case you guys were wondering, he nearly threw his suitcase out the window just 2 minutes ago. No, I'm kidding. He didn't do that. But you're there doing CS Asia Championship from Romania. Is because it's PGO, obviously. So you've had some, you have some ludicrous starts to the in terms of times and hours, right? You told me just now that you need to wake up at like what 5 a.m. the next day. How are you managing that?
So right now the schedule is crazy. So luckily I'm casted with Henry and we're on the later shift, but the call time for the first shift is 5 a.m. So I like to be up kind of because it's an accelerated schedule. So, technically our games don't start till later, but they could start at any time. There's a world in which those early games are super fast and then you end up being in a position where you're just rushing to the studio and I don't want to be in that. And so I can't really sleep that well. So I'm just kind of like waking up, checking the game, seeing what's happening. So I'd rather just get up when the other guys get up. So yeah, waking up around 5, sometimes 6 a.m. Settle
Running
on
a
bed.
half a marathon, going for a gym session, cold shower.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Unfortunately, yes, a cold shower because my bloody hot water isn't working in here. But yeah.
Welcome to the Balkans, brother.
No, it's good. Romania is always a fun time. I enjoy being here. The hotel PGL put us in. They're super nice all the time.
Yeah. I actually think I know what the hotel is because I was there like 3 weeks ago for Joculan, right? And I had an
Yeah.
Airbnb and we were just walking and I was like, that's such a nice hotel. And I'm like, this is probably where PGL put their people.
Yeah, well, if anybody has ever worked PGL events, they know exactly where we are. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, okay, then it's the same one that I was thinking about. All right. Moving forward, now we're here to discuss EPL, but before we get into it, you told me because the plan was to originally record this either yesterday or today. You yourself are doing a podcast. That's why you have that mic, by the way. That's why you're holding the microphone. Obviously, you
Yes.
have a setup provided by PGO, I guess, in the hotel room. But uh, what is that podcast about? Before we get into the EPL conversation, because I've seen one or two episodes. I know is the Bitcoin podcast that you're doing with Henry. Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So
How's that been going?
it's called the Post Plan Podcast, technically is the
Mm,
title, but yes, we have a sponsor as the Bitcoin
yeah.
website. Um, yeah, it's going well. We have some good guests on twice a month. We do one every 2 weeks. It's a 1 hour show where we just talk about and recap Counter Strike events that have happened. Sometimes we just talk to the guests about their life or their career. So far we've mainly had broadcast talent. We've had Hugo, Harry, Sponge, Machine. We've had the duos, Maui Snake. We had MacMade on. So
Mm.
yeah, we've got an episode we're going to record tomorrow with Paula. So we just kind of talk all things Counter Strike, and then we talk a little bit about the guest and casting specifics and things
Then
behind the scenes that you
powerlifting,
might.
I guess, with Pala.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about that with Paula. Yeah, we'll talk about his MMA, his lifting. We'll see what we get out of Paula tomorrow. Maybe some YouTube stuff.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna leave a link below in case someone that is watching this
Yeah.
might not know about it and can give it a go. But now we're here to talk about ESL Pro League, and one of the good things about having you as a guest for this is because you covered the event, you were there the entire time, and the way that we're gonna do this, we're gonna start it off by both me and you saying or giving one team that has impressed us in a way, and then one team that has disappointed us, and then we're gonna discuss whatever's left in the end. So, Dinko, which team surpassed your expectations, or maybe not surpassed your expectations, but just impressed you in general during EPL?
Vitality for me. I think it's hard to have them surpass your expectations because of
Right.
last season.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely fair to say that you can be happy with Vitality's performances again. I mean, this is a team that dominated all of last season, winning all the big events. Could have won Blast Bounty or whatever, but done better over there. But winning every LAN, big tier 1 event through the first season, coming into the second season, and then starting to get top 4 finishes, grand finals, but not actually winning an event yet. and you start to wonder, you know, are they going to be able to even get back to the winning form? Everyone was kind of expecting they would at some point, but when would that be? And Vitality themselves had said, you know, they've been eating too well. They're just lost a little bit of hunger, a little bit
Mm.
of that panache that they had in the earlier part of the season, the earlier part of the year. And then they obviously said they wanted to win an event before the major came around. So Pro League seemed like a good option. It's one of the last events. It's the last big event with like a Swiss format and the amount of teams attending before the major. You know, Chengdu, etc., and the Blast event in Hong Kong have very good teams going to them, but this is one of the big ones too. So I was excited to see what Vitality would do. They came into the opening of the tournament. They lost to Gentlemates, which
Yeah.
was super surprising. That was over on the beach, and I remember coming back from my shift, going into my room, and just kind of eating some dinner, looking at the screen. I was like, oh, time to watch Vitality win their opening game. Then I watched them get 2-0 by Gentlemates, a team that
Yeah.
wasn't even meant to be there. So that was surprising, but it was the way Vitality bounced back that was great to see throughout the competition. I mean, they went on a tear, right? They lost to Gentlemates, but then they bounced back against Gamer Legion, very, very convincingly. They only lost a few rounds in each of these series that preceded, or sorry, were after the opening game. And so, for the Vitality, for me, are absolutely a scary team all the time. But it's when flameZ is playing the way he did, like in this
Sure.
tournament, and mezii, that's the part that surpasses expectations for me because you know flameZ and mezii looked incredible. You know,
Mm.
you've got Zywoo, you've got Rops in that team. You know what to expect from those two players. But at this event, I was really excited to see how mezii was playing, how flameZ was playing. You know, flameZ in that final was easily the MVP of that grand final. mezii had many moments throughout the entire event. I think on average he was just incredible. A lot of important clutches from him and moments from mezii that just looked brilliant.
Yeah,
I
the
think
Glock
ever
one
since.
on those two.
Exactly, that
Yeah.
clutch was huge. So mezii just has had a lot of big moments. flameZ had a lot of big moments, and so for me, there's just so much depth and vitality. And I think the way they won the competition, dominating the grand final 3-0 over Falcons, was just super impressive to see. So I'm very pleasantly surprised with how strongly Vitality bounced back compared to the rest of their opposition.
Yeah, just to give it a little bit of context, by the way, and bring some numbers to what you were saying, because I completely agree with you. I feel like it was absolutely crazy, by the way, that this team can do stuff that they didn't do in the first half of the year, right? Because mezii was still incredibly reliable, flameZ was still incredibly sharp. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first grand final in which flameZ just takes over like this, right? And it's not. I even feel like Apex had more showings like that in grand finals than flameZ in the first half of the year. And now you're looking at Inferno, where it was a 25 and 16 against Falcons. On Train 23 and 14 in both those maps. The first one above 6% swing, the second one above 4%. And then you're looking at mezii on Dust 2, looking at 19 and 10. You're going to say, well, 19 and 10 isn't anything outrageous. But then you contextualize a little bit with the rounds that he played, especially in the first half. And you realize that he was what Zywoo is meant to be in those types of maps. And I feel like it's terrifying that this is possible.
Yeah, it is. It's very scary. Obviously, Zywoo still won the DHL MVP. Monacy won the HLTV MVP.
Yeah.
But I think flameZ and mezii absolutely deserve some flowers as well for their performances. And yeah, as you highlighted their statistics, in particular the maps they played well on. You know, it wasn't Zywoo showing up to the massive level
Yeah.
and carrying the team. It was flameZ who was the standout player from that grand final. In particular, the Inferno you mentioned. That first map really set the tone for the rest of the grand final. Inferno is just it's not a great map for Falcons. Obviously, it's their weakest, so and the one that they have to play at least. And a lot of teams still punishing Falcons on it. We've seen Aurora do it back at EWC when Falcons
Sure.
were on a bit of a run. Aurora had that in the earlier stages of the playoffs. This one in the grand final, the tone is set on an Inferno where flameZ just kind of dominates them. So, yeah, I think it's very scary to see Vitality have the level of depth on the squad when flameZ and mezii are playing like this, because then you have Robs and Zywoo as well. So
Yeah.
pretty insane. And I think they absolutely are now the team to look out for the major, especially based on the performance of all the other teams near the top.
You know what's the terrifying part about all of this? The most terrifying part is that, as you said, they had those moments where they would lose a map. But I feel like Vitality is one of the best teams in the history of this game to lose the first map and then win the second and the third flawlessly, right? It's kind of like something clicks in, and then they go into the second map, and you can't quite believe that is the same two teams that played on map one. And I feel like this is happening in the run of tournaments as well, not only in the context of maps, but just game to game. They look more and more convincing the more they start winning. And the fact that we have our expectations, I don't want to say lowered, but let's say a lot of people were disappointed with the fact that Vitality hadn't won an event prior to Pro League all this season, right? You're still looking at the results. You're looking at the top 4 in Cologne, top 4 Blast Bounty, top 4 Esports World Cup, and the second place the Blast Open London. This is still a team that doesn't go below top 4. And we're here being like, we're a little bit worried about their form. What is there anything to be worried about actually in essence?
No, I don't think so. I think it's unrealistic to expect a team to win every single tournament, but that's just the precedent that Vitality set at the start of the year. You can't get better than first. You can't perform better than they did. Yanko said they could have done better at Blast Bounty. Fair enough. But everything else, they were just, you can't get better than what they did, right? It was just, the streak was incredible. They won the major. They won Cologne. They won the Katowice. Not Cologne. They won Katowice. They won the major. Then they come to Cologne, and it's like their first drop off, right? But this is a team that, I think they would have expected themselves, based on the form they were on, to win Cologne. And it is weird to say, but they were early exits for Vitality, top 4 finishes and grand final finishes. But, back to getting a win under their belt. And absolutely, I think it's just a testament to how incredible their first season of the year was when you say that it's an underperformance from Vitality's own standard when you're in top 4. So, nothing to worry about for Vitality. I think they're still very much the best performing team in the world.
Yeah, I think it's a compliment, if anything, because I think the only other team in the history of this game that we would say not winning an event is a failure for was Prime Astralis. I really believe that. I don't think there's been another team that would go 3 events in a row, top 4 finish or a grand final, and then they lose, and we'd be like, well, they should be winning the event, unless it was like 2021 Navi playing a tier 2 LAN, right?
Right, exactly. So I think you're right. I think, Prime Astralis is probably the only one that you would even put in that same conversation right now with this version of Vitality and what they've accomplished this year. So can't help but be happy for Vitality to perform like that again and be excited about it, because we've seen some other rosters make some moves. We've seen some other title winners, but Furia, G2, Spirit, those are the teams that have won titles this season. They don't look that good at a Pro League, especially G2s and Furias of the world. Furia got better towards the end, but their stage 1 was rough. It was even touch and go whether or not they would make it into stage 2.
Sure.
And Spirit just got absolutely bodied, and we'll get onto that, I'm sure, in a little bit. But absolutely bodied in the playoffs. So Vitality, absolutely the best performing team in the world right now.
Yeah, okay. I think we can all agree on that. And I think there isn't much more to say about Vitality. They're just the best, right? With a margin. But it's going to be interesting to see if they can win another one before the major, right? You pointed out there's a couple of events. I don't really feel like it matters at this point, but I think they would be, if they are able to win one more event until the major starts, then it's just done so for everybody else. But we're going to move into my first point, the second point of the show, and it's going to be a good one again. Now, as a tier 2 merchant myself, I can't help but to speak about not a team that I would call tier 2 necessarily nowadays. I would just call them tier 1.5. But I'll speak about 3D Max. I want to say that for me, 3D Max, as much as we made that reference, I think, with King T a little bit a while ago. So if you imagine the term gatekeepers, 3D Max is the gate, but without the doors, just the frame. So anyone can go in and go out at any time they please, right? They can beat all the teams that are above them, or most of the teams that are above them, but then they can lose to, I don't know, a top 80 team if they want to, right? So I feel like that's been an issue for them. But I personally have been really pleasantly surprised by Gravity as an in-game leader and the change that this has brought on to the team, right? I had an interview with Maka, it was actually one of the most recent ones I did, where we talk about that change, and he felt like Gravity maybe couldn't bring enough to the table outside of being a potential in-game leader. So that's why they make the adjustment, right? Because apparently things were not really clicking on a tactical level. Maka doesn't feel like, or the team didn't feel like the leadership of Maka was leading them to the direction that they wanted. And then Gravity was underperforming individually. So you make that swap. And I'm not going to lie to you, in my head, I was thinking, well, they just don't want to make a change mid-season, right? That should be the only reason why you're putting Gravity in that spot. But Gravity was in-game leading on Gen 1, and before that, when he was in high school, I found out, in one of his first teams. Maka told me that. So for me, that was just the change of, okay, let's just move the pieces around, see what we're going to be able to get until the end of the season. And then if things don't really change, we're just going to make the changes at the end of the year, right? But then suddenly I'm watching 3D Max now, and for me, it feels like they had one of the most legitimate runs in ESL Pro League out of most teams. Obviously, they didn't make it into the grand final or the semifinals, but you're looking at some of the teams that 3D Max had to play. I mean, you started off with a 0-2 loss to Furia, which I don't think a lot of people could vote you for, because Furia is one of the most dangerous dark horses in the world right now. Then you 2-0 FaZe Clan, you 2-1 Na'Vi, you lose to Mouse, you 2-0 G2, for me that was the big one, and then you're going up against the Falcons, and if we're completely honest here, 3D Max was in a position to even win that game, right? They won Inferno, they lost Ancient, and then on Nuke they post a 3-9 CT side, and then they come back on the T side and they force overtime. So I feel like 3D Max, even when you just look at the name value of the teams that they played and how they did, they over exceeded expectations considering they made the change to Gravity being the in-game leader a little while ago. But I feel like the main point to be made here is that there has been, and I was discussing that with actually with the assistant coach of Passion UA with Monster just a couple of days ago. There's a really obvious improvement in the mid rounding for 3D Max, especially when it comes down to the CT side, but T side is always quite noticeable because if we want to go back to the initial idea of what 3D Max is doing on the server, what is the type of Counter-Strike they play, all of us would just snap our fingers and be like, cool creative play, set pieces, but lack of consistency, right? As long as they go off of spawn with a clear idea, they have good pushes, they're really aggressive, they have a lot of ideas for the mid round, but it's not really on the go, right? It's not really on the fly. It's pre-planned most of the time. And now, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel like for me, 3D Max were making some incredibly shrewd adjustments in the middle of the round. And I think there's a really strong point to be made that in terms of their mid-rounding, 3D Max right now are playing Counter-Strike like a tier 1 team, or at least they did during Pro League.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you on that. I think when you look at 3D Max, the way they play now, I think one of the biggest criticisms for them has always been their map pool.
Sure.
They have a few maps that are really solid. I
Yeah.
love their Inferno in particular. But they would like scrape through them sometimes when they're playing against top teams. Now they can actually comfortably win their map picks. And I have to agree, it seems like they have a solid plan going into a round, but when shit hits the fan, right, they're able to figure out a new pathway or a couple of different options. I've casted a lot of 3D Max games recently in this season, a lot of them, because I've gone to the same
I am
tournaments
happy
as
and
them.
sad for you in the same time.
Yeah, they can be. Yeah, they can be up and down. This team, you know, they really
Yeah.
can be. They can be a really fun and exciting team to watch, and sometimes it can be really weak. And I think that's the problem with 3D Max at the moment. It's just they're a little bit inconsistent. Even at this event we're casting right now at CAC, this is an event I think 3D Max could win. Right? They've come to this tournament right after Pro League, made it all the way to the playoffs. We don't have the best teams in attendance here.
Yeah.
You know, Liquid and FaZe I think are two of the biggest rosters that you'd be looking at, and FaZe obviously struggling at the moment. They just brought in Jacob back again.
And Liquid are Liquid.
And Liquid are Liquid. They're actually looking pretty good.
Yeah.
We'll see how they look in the
I'm just a hater
game.
when it comes down to Liquid.
That's fair enough. They're in that deciding game of the groups with Legacy. We'll see where Liquid goes, semis or quarterfinals. But for 3D Max, man, they started the tournament yesterday. They beat Hans 13-1. Then they lost to Legacy. They lost on their two maps as well. They lost to Dust 2, which can sometimes be a little up and down for 3D Max.
Yeah.
And then they lost on Inferno. Now, they played those two maps today against Limvision. They got a 2-0 win, and they looked a lot better. A lot of people believe it's because of the jet lag that 3D Max have maybe struggled
I think Henry made that point on broadcast, right?
Yeah, and Maui as well.
Yeah.
But yesterday against Legacy, they weren't doing what you're talking about, right? It didn't seem like they were able to get into those mid rounds and have good calls mid round. So I am thinking that maybe just the insane travel is getting to them. So let's cast our minds back to the beginning of their travel in the season then, because they played Cologne. But before that, obviously, they went to the Fisher Playground 1. So that was the first event out of the player break. I see you there, Ted.
And Maka was still the in-game leader.
Yes, and then they went to Cologne and didn't do necessarily great. They lost to the Mongols. They lost to G2. G2 went on to win the tournament. Mongols are one of the best teams in the world.
They won an event in Asia.
Yes, then they went to Esports World Cup, and this is where Gravity started in-game leading, right? Yeah. So they immediately started with a bang. They beat Na'Vi 2-1 in the opening game. A lot of people didn't expect that, especially Na'Vi, who were the defending champions of EWC. Went out after the first game. Then they lost to the Mongols. They went on to win the Esports World Cup. So in Cologne, they lost to G2, who won the event, and then they lost to the Mongols, the winners of EWC. Then they went to China. They won that event. It was against Tyloo, Envision, etc. Then they went to Fisher, and I think it was a pretty disappointing event for them. They lost to Virtus Pro. Like, they started strong. They beat Mongols. They finally beat Mongols in the opening game. And Mongols, they didn't practice, by the way, coming into that event. They went on to fumble everything, and they lost to FaZe, then they lost to Gamer Legion, and then they lost to Virtus Pro. So went up 2-0, lost 3 games in a row. Pro League was fantastic, maybe quarterfinals. But dude, they went to the quarterfinals, which means they're on the road for 3 weeks nearly. And we're talking this team then had to go to China, literally the couple of days later,
Yeah.
and then perform at the event they're currently at right now. So this team have been on a grind, like a crazy grind right now. And yeah, I think the inconsistencies of the team are fair enough just with the amount of travel. You're not able to reset, you're not able to practice and fix things. But I think this gravity change is fantastic to become an in-game leader because
Yeah.
they just look better. They look better on their map picks. They look better in the mid rounds. Maka's individual level can increase because he's not focusing on the in-game leadership. Gravity, it just makes sense for him to be an in-game leader with the way he plays. Like he loves to buy Mac 10 and be like the sacrificial player as
Yeah.
well, which is quite common behavior for an in-game leader. But in general, yeah, I've enjoyed 3D Max a lot more this season. I've got to see a lot of them. They're up and down, and I think they're still figuring things out. And I think when you try to be a full French team, you can't. There's not really a whole lot of options to go to if you're looking for an in-game leader, right? So you might as
No.
well give Gravity a go, and
You might
it's
wait
working
for
out pretty
Vitality
well.
to fade away and try and get Apex on that fat contract in a couple years.
Yeah, in a couple years, but I think Apex might have some other offers on the way there. But if that
Yeah.
was the case, if he's leaving Vitality, but yeah, I think for 3 Max is kind of the best they can be. We'll
Yeah.
see how, I think they could win this event in China at the moment. They have one chance to get through the groups tomorrow. So interested to see how they're going to perform tomorrow. Maybe they get through into the playoffs, and who knows
Yeah.
what happens from them. But yeah, 3 Max, yeah, good run in Pro League in particular. Very happy about that.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that's happening to this team is the fact that, so most of the time, when you have a player that wasn't the in-game leader become the IGL, it's a lot easier for him to put himself in the shoes of all the players around the map and know what people want out of an in-game leader, right? It's kind of like when you're a kid and you're playing football, for example, and you want to be a striker, but then the coach makes you play midfielder, defender, and everything around the field, and you're there scratching your head. You're like, I want to score goals, I want to be a striker. And then a couple years pass and you realize that actually him putting you in those spots has made you understand the entire game a lot better, right? And then you become a better striker. And I feel like this is what is going on right now with Gravity, because there's no one else that could tell you, because Mac has been an in-game leader for such a long time, and he's an oper as well. Like he does the role that requires the most amount of space and freedom. He's the diva, the star of the team, right? Whatever he needs, he's gonna get on a team, especially when you're an in-game leader and an oper. That's double trouble for your teammates right there. So when you have someone like Gravity, who's, as you pointed out, a lot more sacrificial, he's a bit of a supportive element. He likes running him first. He's gonna take initiative on the CT side, but T side he can sacrifice, he can pronate and blah blah blah. He's probably the one that understands his teammates a lot better, and he knows what they need. And I feel like one of the main proofs to that is Exorcist's performance, because Exorcist throughout the last 5 years, because you say you've casted a lot of 3D Max, I casted a lot of those guys before they entered the tier 1 circuit. Exorcist is a rifler that's done everything that is possible to do if you're not an in-game leader or an oper, right? He's done everything. He's been an entry, he's been a lurker, he's been a support, a pack player, star, anchor on CT sides, he's done it all. I feel like the strongest Exorcist is when he gets to be an aggressive player on CT sides, because he's cracked individually, and then when he gets on the T side, be a bit more of a pack guy, not necessarily the entry, maybe a lurk at times. And that immediate change into Exorcist taking more initiative, Body taking more initiative, Maka recognizing that he's a lot better of a clutching oper than an aggressive one, and some of the entry attempts dropping a little bit. This is just proof that 3D Max is functioning a lot better in accordance to what are the pieces that they actually have. So for me, this is a good sign. I still don't see the consistency in there, but I feel like they do have that unfortunate plague of we play well against top 10 teams, but then when we face off against the teams that are ranked between 15 and 30, if we don't really know what to expect, so we're just choking a lot of the time. I still don't feel like they're quite there yet, like the Mongols, where they're just going to be running everyone below them down. But yeah, they are pretty exciting. Anything else to add to that, or we can get into your first negative point?
Yeah, I mean, just one more positive
Sure.
on Exorcist. I think, in particular, I've really enjoyed watching him.
Yeah.
I think he is incredible in sort of mid-round situations. I think he's a big reason as to why you're finding more success in the mid-rounds. Obviously, with Gravity's in-game leadership, but I think Exorcist is really thriving in the environment. Like he always seems to find a way to make the difference for 3D
Sure.
Max in swing rounds and important rounds. I remember a couple today where he just gets in the smokes on Dust 2 and Infernos and the apartments. Like there's just a lot of moments where Exorcist pops off. His mechanics are great. He's really solid as a lurker as well on certain maps, especially Inferno. I feel like he has a great read of when to punish and when to get aggressive. Over towards A as a lurker while his teammates are taking banana. So Exorcist for me, yeah, he's been the standout player recently on 3D Max that I've enjoyed watching.
Okay, so now that we've talked our positive stuff, we can actually become proper broadcast talent and start hating on people.
Okay.
So, which team disappointed you at Pro League?
The team that disappointed me a lot was the Mongols, right? This
Okay.
is a team that won EWC, were major finalists in Austin,
Mm-hmm.
finalists at Fisher. Like, these guys don't say they don't practice, man. Like, they come out of EWC, they just won a massive tournament. Then you go to Fisher, they say we didn't practice. They lost to 3 Max in the opening game, then recovered, had to go on this recovery mission. They beat everybody in front of them. Then they got to the grand final against Furia. They lost that, but in a 3-2 fashion, all 5 maps of a BO5. Then they come to Pro League. They say they didn't practice again, and they lost to Hotu in the opening game. And this time they didn't bounce back immediately. This time they lost to Inner Circle 2-0.
Mm.
And this is because they come in stage 2. These teams they lose to, they're the 2 top performing teams out of the stage 1 of Pro League, right? The 2 teams that were the surprises, Inner Circle and Hotu. And Hotu, because the teams seeded themselves going into stage 2, Hotu and Inner Circle got very lowly seeded, and Mongols obviously got seeded very highly by the peer seeding. So this should have been a great opportunity for Mongols to start strong in the group stages. But no, they lost to the 2 weakest teams. Then they had to try and recover against some of the better teams and go on a 3-0 run. And so they did against Gamer Legion. They got a 2-1 win over them. Then they went on to play Gentle Mates, who were another surprise from stage 1. They beat them 2-0, to be fair. But then against Na'Vi in the last chance game, it's a tough team when Na'Vi start to play well. And now, obviously, Mongols going out there and not making it into the playoffs is a massive disappointment. This is a team we're talking about winning big titles, EWC, going to the major final in Austin. How are you not making it out of Pro League groups when your first 2 matches are Hotu and Inner Circle? And it's because they don't practice coming into these big events. And, Yanko brought up a great point, and I tend to agree with it. If there was any other team that said every time they go to a Tier 1 event that we didn't practice, they'd be getting so much hate for it.
Absolutely
so much pressure
butchered.
being
Yeah.
put on. Yeah, exactly. But Mongols get away with it because they're a likable team. But man, just think about the season they could have had. Think about the events they could have won. You're coming off the major, maybe you practice going into Cologne. Maybe you could win Cologne. That's a big title. Vitality lost. Spirit are playing with a team they're not moving forward in the future with. This is an event that Mongols absolutely could have won. They could have won EWC because they're warmed up a little bit more. Then Fisher, maybe practice ahead of that event. Maybe you beat Furia, you get another title under your belt. And then Pro League, not making it out of groups, that is ridiculous by Mongol standards, especially because of the 2 opening games. So we'll see how they play at Thunderpick World Championship. That's where they're at right now. They've been boot camping apparently in Serbia. So I'm just hoping the Mongols are able to get back to better form and ramp things up for the major. But I am disappointed about them and their performances at recent events just because they don't practice.
You know what's the most unfortunate thing? First of all, I just don't know if I can buy into a team coming out and saying we don't practice. I can't imagine how that happens. How you're just going into a Tier 1 tournament and you're like, well, we decided to just chill and we're gonna see what happens. But the concerning thing for me is whether they did or they didn't, because we need to take their words for face value, right? When they come out and say we didn't practice, we need to believe that, and then we're gonna be asking questions. We're gonna be like, well, what the hell are you doing? And as you pointed out, and it's a pretty fair question. Well, aren't you guys thinking about what could have been if you were practicing for those events? Because you missed out on a couple opportunities. For me, the most concerning thing is that the Mongols throughout the last 1 year, and especially in the first season of 2025, were one of the teams that you were never going to doubt are going to make it out of the groups. They were always going to make it into playoffs. It was them, it was Aurora, and it was Mouse. The 3 teams. Obviously, Vitality, we're not counting because they were just winning everything, weren't they? So, but they were part of that group of teams that would never get grouped. The Mongols never got grouped. Even Aurora have some of those occasional moments when they just drop the ball, right? And they had the same at EPL, but I feel like with them, it's a little bit more expected now because they're a bit more volatile. But obviously they can make it out, but they can also not make it, is what I'm trying to say. With the Mongols, it's absolutely crazy. And the fact that you went into that tournament being the #1 team in the world VRS-wise, obviously everyone's looking at HLTV top 20, but or leaderboard, but still, it is for me concerning because they've never been like that. Even when they've had choke moments, it's been the stage games where they go against the best teams and then they can't perform. This time around, as you pointed out, you're playing against a couple hot on their heels international teams from Tier 2 Counter-Strike, but it's still bloody Hodu Inner Circle. And then a lackluster Na'Vi, which I think if they were to lose to any one out of those 5 teams that they played, Na'Vi would have been the one that we wouldn't criticize them for. But then you're looking at the whole 2 game and you're like, man, I love Norbert. I was so happy for those guys. But if you're the Mongols, you can't lose to fucking Norbert in 2025 and like while he's playing on Hotu. You can't lose to Inner Circle. Both those teams are really impressive. Don't get me wrong. But the Mongols are just not the team to lose to those guys. Are you going to see Vitality do that? Well, yes, because they did lose to the Gentlemaids, but then they farmed everybody else. That's what the Mongols should have done.
Yeah, absolutely. For the Mongols, though, I think we have to also understand the fact that they are from Mongolia. It's super far away. You know, when you go out there, who are you going to practice against? You know,
Sure.
lesser Mongolian teams, the
But that's
Asian
why you
teams.
boot camp in Europe.
Exactly. But then I'm wondering maybe they have some visa issues or numbers
Okay.
of days or Schengen days or whatever. But then Serbia kind of gets rid of that problem, right? But I'm just not sure how the whole logistics works with it. So we'd have to talk to Mongols and really figure that out, whether or not it's just we need time at home or it's the if it's actually some sort of logistical issue, then that's more understandable for me. But
Okay.
to me, probably worth sacrificing some of that time at home to get some of these events wins. I mean, you've just had 2 weeks before Fisher. Did you really need it after as well? I don't think so. So, I think yeah, I would be intrigued to see if it's more of like a logistical standpoint thing. And if they go out to Mongolia, do they want to practice? Probably not because you don't want to form the bad habits or whatever. But it's yeah, it's just disappointing for Mongols. It would be great to see them stay in Europe a little bit more and ahead of this busy event schedule. But maybe they've had a talk ahead of this season and said to themselves, guys, we want to peak at the major. You know, our goal is if we made a major final in Austin, we can win a major. So I think for Mongols, it might be a conversation about let's take a little bit more time at home at the start of the season, but when we get towards the end of the season, we really need to ramp things up. And I hope we're at that period of time now after Pro League where we're going to see Mongols really ramp up the practice and really ramp up the performances and get into a winning condition to really challenge for that Star Ladder Budapest major.
Yeah, as you pointed out, they are playing an event right now that they should be winning on paper. Thunder
They
Peak
won
in
last
Malta.
year.
Yeah, should do it
So
again.
yeah, they should. Defending champions. We'll see if they can pick it up.
Yeah, that's going to erase all the doubts, I guess, or at least most of them. So now we're going into my negative point, and I'm not gonna lie to you. I had a lot of teams on my mind for that one. I had obviously Astralis because they went out 0-3 and they were pretty bad. But I feel like with them, I've become a little bit numb. It's just the fact that I love Stare as a player. So I just have big expectations out of the team because of Stare. But then in the end of the day, it's been tough. I did decide to go with Spirit on this one.
Yeah.
And the reason I want to go with Spirit on this one is, and I know it sounds a little bit funky because Spirit did what the Mongols couldn't, right? They beat both Inner Circle and Halter, even though they did lose a map against Inner Circle, and then they 2-0 G2. G2 was another one that was probably on the table, but I wouldn't say as disappointing. And then Spirit go into the quarterfinals. And that game against FaZe, as much as every other person, I did absolutely love to see Frozen go absolutely crazy. And, you know, FaZe keep the run going with Rain for one last time. It was the entire hooray. That was a great story, obviously, for them. But I still feel like Spirit should have won that game. Or at least I feel like Spirit should have been able to push FaZe a little bit harder, right? Even if you lose a map, even if you lose the series, losing 9-13 and 5-13 to FaZe Clan on Nuke and Mirage, considering they're playing with a team that's not going to be the same in just a couple of days after the end of the event, I think that was a pretty big bombing out. I think we've reached that point where it wouldn't be just to say that for every team, but Spirit isn't that group of lineups that you're looking at and you're saying this result, because of this one best of 3, I am disappointed. It's not that they had a bad event overall, because they still made it out in the playoffs. They're still readjusting. They've changed some of the things. Obviously, Zwei now, if you look at the entry attempts, let's say on T side, Zwei has transitioned from being Tenir to being an aggressive Zwei, right? He's almost an entry now. He's that aggressive. I think the numbers were something like 27% attempts for Donk, and then Zwei is something like 26.2. And then Tenir just shifted into being the most passive player in the world, just being a lurk on T side. And even on the CT side, he's not getting a lot of the rotator spots and a lot of the initiative spots that he had on Heroic. So there's obviously a lot of readjustments going on Spirit, but I still feel like because of all the circumstances and the fact that they were playing a phase that I guess is dangerous. Sorry. Dangerous because they had 1-3 in a row, and this is where you get the best out of FaZe when they get the momentum rolling and they don't really have anything to lose. I still expected to see a little bit more solid Counter-Strike out of Spirit. I still expected them to be able to handle FaZe a bit better, even though they might be one of the most difficult teams to handle when they're on a ride like that. But yeah, getting 14 rounds across 2 maps against FaZe that are going to be making a change after the event and playing with Rain as a stand-in just didn't quite cut it for me.
It was a miserable performance from Team Spirit coming into that playoffs. It is the way they lost that is disappointing and surprising. You know, if they lose to FaZe just about in 3 maps, and FaZe are just doing their
Yeah,
classic
absolutely. If
BS,
it's an
coming back.
overtime third map, you're not going to fold them if
Right.
Twistzz just goes crazy and drops 20 kills in 5 rounds.
Yeah. Well, they got dismantled by FaZe that are playing with a stand-in. I know it's crazy to say Reigns a stand-in, but it's true. He talked about how the system actually changed a lot in his time out. He was only out for 2 weeks, but he comes back and a bunch of new call-outs are in the game because Twistzz has brought them in.
And
Reigns
then for the
having to
first
play
time
out.
in his career, he's like, "Where are the sheets at, boys?"
Yeah, exactly. And so Rain's playing out of position in a lot of situations, a lot of maps. So this is FaZe just trying to figure it out on the fly. And yeah, you're right. In terms of being a team that play without pressure, FaZe are one of the scariest teams to go up against. McCarrigan's like calling with a stand-in, and the pressure's off. They have a lot of firepower. Frozen was having a great tournament. Twistzz was lights out. That's awesome to see, but it's just the fashion that Spirit lost is crazy. Nuke and Mirage. Mirage is utterly terrible. Donk was raging like every round, slamming the desk, looking around. Just the emotions got to the team completely. We listened to the team comms. It was Tanier who was just botting out on Mirage, like really bad individual map there for Tanier. And he's like, "Hey guys, we're really gloomy. Like what's going on?" And Chopper goes, "I think you understand we're having a bad game and a bad map." And he's trying to cheer people up. Tanier from the bottom of the scoreboard. But yeah, the vibes were just wretched inside of the Spirit team for the playoffs. Very, very disappointing. I think one of the worst showings I've ever seen from Team Spirit. So, yeah, very disappointing. But then you remind yourself, they're bringing a new player in.
Yeah.
Sway's not that long in the team either. I'd be down to see Tanier and Zoltex on the same team, even Magic's personally. But
All right.
yeah, I think one of those would be cool to be alongside Tanier, some of that experience. But we'll see. I think it'll take a little bit of time. Sway didn't play very well. Tanier didn't play very well in that game in particular. No one did really. Donk not even that good. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just really massive underperformance from everyone. Team Spirit seemed like they had mental collapse. At least it's just Pro League. Like Spirit have some time to get into the major swing of things, but yeah, we got to see some better performances almost immediately from them at the next events. I had Spirit winning this event. I thought it was going to click and go really smoothly. It seemed to be that way throughout the group stages. Looked really good. Looked pretty comfortable.
Be careful with that. The French fans are going to start hunting you down.
That's true. That's fair enough. But I thought for sure Team Spirit would play better in the playoffs. That FaZe would give them a fun game, but I thought Spirit would get through that, and they didn't. So super disappointing from Team Spirit, absolutely. And I think that's a fair pick for a negative coming into Pro League.
Yeah, the good thing is that they have like a little bit over 2 weeks, like 2.5 weeks before the start of Chengdu, and that's their next event, right? So we're gonna see them reflect on some of the things that didn't go right, and then I guess we can use Chengdu and Blast Rivals as a bit of a benchmark onto what to expect out of them. But yeah, I do agree with you. I think the only thing that I care about when it comes down to Spirit right now is that Tanier stays on the team. Anything else, and Donk obviously and Shiro, but anything else, I'm open. An open mind for that team's development in future. But I still feel like they will do well. It's just about, I guess, giving it a little bit of time to click. So now we have a couple things that we haven't discussed for this entire event that are pretty important points as well. What about Falcons? What do you make out of the Falcons' performance? Are you a little bit disappointed by the way that they couldn't pick up a map against Vitality in the grand final, or do you feel like this was just Vitality being unplayable? Because this was the third time this year that Falcons have played a best of 5 final against Vitality. The last 2 times, they at least picked up 2 maps, right? One of them was that notorious 12-6 lead on Nuke on the third one, or on the 5th one where they choked. But yeah, but both times it was a lot more competitive than it was that time around. This time around, the best maps for the Falcons was the first one. It was Inferno with 10 rounds, and every single other map was just becoming worse and worse and worse. So what do you make out of it?
Well, I casted the last 2 maps of that grand final, and I will tell you, it was not that good. Falcons, I think the event itself was overall good.
Yeah.
You beat Astralis 2-0, you beat Navi 2-0, come in and beat Mouse, beat 3D Max, beat Mouse again. I think it's a very decent result to get into the final. I thought, yeah, Falcons seem like they might be able to give Vitality a good run. I'll still call Vitality favorites in that final, but let's see what we've got. I think many people were anticipating we could even possibly go to 5 maps, but absolutely dominated. Another final that just gets away from Falcons, and you could just see like across their faces they kind of knew it was lost. kyousuke in particular, man, he looks a little bit lost, and I think it's really unfair the expectations that have been put on him. Like fair enough,
Yeah.
it costs a lot of money. But a lot of people calling him, the next Donk, I think is unreasonable pressure. Like, I think
Sure.
we underestimate how rare a player like Donk really is. And,
Yeah.
Donk is someone that hit the ground running, very much so,
Like
in
no one's done
2023.
before as well. Like even
Exactly, right?
even even Zywu, even Simple didn't achieve what he did achieve
Exactly.
in just 1 year of professional Counter Strike. So we gotta have that benchmark. Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, it's like his first ever event. Donk pulled off the first LAN reverse sweep in a best of 5 final to win his first title, and then went on to play in Katowice at the start of the next year, and obviously won that event as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, Donk's crazy, but kyousuke, he's not Donk, and I think we all realize that now after the couple events we've seen from him, like starting in Cologne till now. There's a number of maps he looks incredibly uncomfortable on. Inferno is one for sure.
Yeah.
We're talking kyousuke is not coming from like a team environment. Donk was playing in that Spirit Academy a lot more, a lot longer in terms of like, he actually had the system built up around him. He had more experienced players alongside of him. In that team, we've seen a couple of those players go on, like Art Frost, etc., go on to actually play in other teams.
Sure.
Played with him in Spirit originally. For kyousuke, you have to remember there's a massive jump up from being a face it god to being in a tier 1 team of all the expectations
Also, Spirit
that you have.
wasn't on the level that Spirit is now, like, or Falcons is now that kyousuke is joining. Spirit wasn't on that level, and there wasn't that type of expectations towards Donk when he
Right.
was getting promoted.
That's exactly true. And the other side of things is Donk came into the team as the star. He wasn't playing alongside mezii and Nico,
Yeah.
right? So, kyousuke is going to find himself in positions he doesn't play very often, and on maps he doesn't want to play, like Inferno. And he just looks a little bit like a fish out of water on Inferno and Train in that grand final, man. Well, it was just so bad. Like, I just felt bad for him. He was that pop dog player on CT side,
Yeah.
like E-Box pop dog player, just getting absolutely wrecked. You had Apex just spamming him through the windows down low. He couldn't stand in that
That
spot. He was
lineup was
getting,
absolutely crazy, by the way. I think that was
yeah,
the first time everyone's seen that. Is the lineup,
yeah,
in case people were wondering, is the lineup because there's an off angle that you're using on the right hand side of the red train. That's right between, or left hand side from the perspective of the CTs, right behind E-Box, where you can catch them when they're swinging out pop. They don't see you, but then the moment that they go a little bit deeper, then you see them. Apex had a lineup to spam that, man, from showers. It's insane.
yeah. So obviously kyousuke looked really uncomfortable in that spot. Didn't really get the grips on how to deal
Mm.
with T-Main and Pop Dog at the same time. Nico came to help him a couple of times, and not necessarily the most success from the squad. So yeah, for Falcons, they're going to be bitterly disappointing. I mean, I seen them after the final, and obviously Nico was despondent. I had one of those clips at the end of Dust 2 as well, where he misses a shot from behind.
Yeah, the
The
one
game
from
was
lower
lost
with the
already.
Deke or
Yeah,
AK. Yeah.
the AK, yeah. But the game was lost anyway at that point, it felt like. But yeah, it was just so flat from Falcons. Disappointing to see them not get a map. I think there's a lot of work to still be done to flesh out that map pool getting into the major. I think they can be good when the major rolls around, but every event they're getting better. The EWC they went on a run. They lost to Aurora. I think their Inferno is looking a little bit better. They're trying a few different things in terms of the positions. Nico's now the rotator. You got kyousuke over in that B bomb site.
Yeah.
Seen that come in at Fisher. So I think they're working on things and figuring it out. And some players gonna have to change up their positions a little bit. But the positive for Falcons, man, we're gonna
mezii.
focus on that final. You're right. Yeah,
Mm.
mezii. mezii is the positive because this is a player who got a lot of criticism recently. His performance has dropped off, and the Fisher in particular was a really bad event.
Yeah.
And I actually seen it in the hotel. I seen Zonic and mezii sitting down in the restaurant. Seemed to have quite a stern conversation when I was walking back to my room. And then I heard at this Pro League, we had Nico on the couch, and he was talking about how Zonic and Nico had a conversation with mezii, asking him, how do we get you involved in the game more? How do we
Okay.
make you feel more comfortable? And yeah, they came up with a few more opening moves, getting mezii some aggressive peaks put into their game plans on the T side. And I think it really took off. mezii was one of the best performing players of the entire event. Obviously won the MVP, even losing the final 3-0, still getting the HLTV MVP. I think it's fantastic to see mezii return to form. And if he's playing well, this Falcons team becomes so much more dangerous more consistently. And to me, that's a big positive. So even though they lost the final 3-0, I'm still excited about Falcons.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the best ways that you can lose a 0-3 grand final, if that makes any sense, right? Not in the context of the grand final itself, but just in the tournament in general. Because I was looking at some of the other numbers. This was the best event of mezii as a Falcons player, and it's his second best event of the year after the first blast that happened in January, February, something like that. So it's been a long time since he's had a consistently good performance, and even in the grand final, even though the team was miserable, he was still having some really good moments, right? Even on that Inferno, we all remember the sick flick towards half wall on the B bomb side, right? So the moment that you see mezii start hitting shots like that, I feel like this is where you're starting to see him show glimpses of what it used to be like on G2. And I completely agree with you. I feel like the team in general just doesn't look bad. It's all about giving yourselves a little bit of time to get kyousuke to that level where he can be the second star. And I actually believe that giving Nico some of those rotating spots again is a good thing. Because Nico's a really vocal guy. He's a secondary caller. He's probably the first caller in some of the scenarios working with Kixon. And individually, he's not been bad either. I think Nico's been really solid. So if you can have kyousuke get a little bit more comfortable on Inferno, and the reason we're speaking about Inferno so much is because prior to joining Falcons, he had like 50, 60 maps on FaZe on Inferno, and in officials, they didn't really play it with Spirit Academy. So you can imagine, like, most of you guys watching probably have played more Infernos on FaZe than kyousuke was before joining Falcons. That's how weird it is. Like, if you load up and play Office nowadays, probably I've played the same amount of Offices that he's played Infernos, right? And that's absolutely crazy to say. So I think all this team just needs is a little bit of belief, right? And obviously it could be difficult for someone like mezii because you do have the weight of knowing that you're not necessarily playing like the player that you were used to be. Because even when G2 was struggling, mezii was always great. And now for the first time in a while, when the team is struggling in some games, you're struggling with the team, so that could be a little bit more tough to deal with, but that wasn't really the case this time around. They just lost the final in a disappointing fashion, but all in all, before that, in the event, I mean, I'm not overlooking the fact that they did whatever they wanted in the server against Mouse. They destroyed them, and that was a great thing. Obviously, Inferno was a 16-13, but then Enshin was no contest, and mezii again was all over them. So I think Falcons are on the right track. I agree with you. I think there's a lot of positives there, and
Yeah.
I feel like the last team that I want to bring up to everyone's attention, I want to hear your opinion on, because there's a couple good things to say there, and we really can't ignore the story in the Cinderella run. Is FaZe Clan. FaZe Clan that had a forfeit loss on their first game because Rain had to fly out, and apparently he missed his transfer the other day as well. Lost luggage. Then he arrived, and he literally arrived like 5 minutes before the start of their first game, which was technically the second game. So they started 0-2, then had to, in true FaZe fashion, win 3 best of 3s in a row, then went into the playoffs, and they beat Spirit, and they got a map off of Vitality. That was probably the most entertaining map of the entire tournament on Mirage, the overtime. It was absolutely crazy. And Twistzz made me believe that he can still be the player that he was a couple of years ago when he was on FaZe Clan, if not better. FaZe Clan is such a sick team to watch, man. I just appreciated it. I just enjoyed it so much. But as someone that did cover that Mirage and covered a lot of the FaZe games, what do you think? What do you make out of that FaZe performance, even though Jacob wasn't on the team and they were still playing with Rain?
Man, FaZe really are the most entertaining team in Counter-Strike. Like, so many different versions of this team have provided us with that entertainment over the years. And this one was no different. You know, I think it's really sad that Rain doesn't get one last major go with FaZe. But there's reasons for that, and they want to move towards like a younger roster for the future, and they probably don't want to end up being caught in a situation where they let his contract expire, for example, I'd imagine, because they've let a lot of their players go for free.
You can probably get a lot of money out of BC Game for him. I just hope he's not the one that requested the helicopter ride in the dinner with his wife each month. I'm not sure if you've seen that.
Yo, I've seen the rumors. I'd be interested to see if that was Rain. I don't know. He seems like a pretty chill guy. But we'll see. I seen there's a lot of sort of conspiracy theories about maybe the social media manager is just saying that for entertainment. You know, who knows? But
at least they're not dropping down to heroic level, because heroic's been outrageous.
Heroic have been crazy. A lot of social media managers causing a lot of drama on Twitter at the moment. Well, we have got I think for FaZe, the fact that they came into this event, you know, woke up that morning, get ready to play with Jacob and Twistzz, and then they're like, hold on, this roster is ineligible to play.
Yeah.
Everyone was kind of in a panic. It was like, what the hell's going on? Rain has said, you know, he was out drinking with his friends that night before. He'd been playing a lot of Deadlock. He was hungover. He wakes up at like lunchtime and is Carrigan on the phone. He's like, hey, would you like to, can you please come to Sweden? He's like, yeah, sure. So gets on the next flight the next day, lands in the evening. It was a touch and go whether or not he's even going to make that game as well. They might have had to forfeit another one. It was all chaotic as hell, but you know, it is the classic FaZe story. We started saying around the venue, like in the green room, etc. We're like, oh, here we go. This is some FaZe bullshit time. They're gonna win the event, and then they're gonna have to play the major with Rain. And but obviously, as time went on, they pull off 3 games in a row. They get into the playoffs. They stomp Spirit. We're like, okay, boys, what is happening? Like, we didn't expect the plot armor to really be here, and then. The opening map of Mirage against Vitality. They're coming back. We're like, no way, no way. You know, Yanko, Jason, and I were casting that one, and we were like, FaZe are back all the time. Kind of like tongue in cheek, but then suddenly it's overtime happened, and they closed the map out, and we're like, holy shit! And you're right, it was Twistzz who was just the standout player, really just doing unspeakable things. And what was so great to hear from the players over in FaZe was about Twistzz coming back. He's an even more mature player now than he was then. He comes in with secondary calling ability, which Carrigan said is the first time he's ever had a true secondary caller in his career.
Since Nico.
Since Nico, yes.
Yeah, you can't shut Nico down.
Yeah, fair enough. But Twistzz is coming in and obviously really stepping up, really performing, really delivering individually. And I'm excited about FaZe's future. We'll see. Hasn't been necessarily the best run in CAC, but man, they were playing the 3rd place decider on that last day. So they had to fly to China immediately after. I seen them getting their suitcases at the studio to go on the shuttle to the airport. So, you know, they didn't even have time really to go rest after that game. So, yeah, race to China. They made it there. Hasn't been the best start for them. They lost that opening game against Foot Esports, but they've recovered today. They got a win, and maybe FaZe can go on a bit of a run at CAC. But yeah, the Pro League run, obviously, just cinema, as FaZe always are, and one last good run from Rain.
You know what? That was a conversation I had with Duncan, with Thorin, like 2 weeks ago. If you're FaZe Clan, and you believe that Twistzz now, because Twistzz, back in the day, last time he was a FaZe player 2 years ago, he was a support guy, right? He was a more lurky type of player, and then he would be an anchor on most of the CT sites, right? He wasn't a star on the first iteration of FaZe. On Liquid is where he became a star player, actually, and an in-game leader, but that didn't quite work out that well. But I guess he's learned a lot out of that entire thing. What me and Dinko were thinking about is, doesn't it just look perfect if you, and I don't want to be the guy to say that because I usually really support young players on the rise, but wouldn't it be perfect if they could just tell Jacob, well, we're sorry for wasting your time, but we want to stick with Rain and Twistzz and just see where that lineup leads us? I think that would have been actually insane. I still believe that, as you said, there is a potential for this team to be even better because obviously Rain played some positions that he's not really used to that much, right? He had to take the initiative a lot more on T sides, for example, which he wasn't necessarily accustomed to. Obviously, he's done it back in the days, but Jacob is going to slot in a lot more naturally in some of those star spots. So I think it is exciting, but just to come back to what you were saying about Twistzz, I feel like just the entire story of Twistzz has been really interesting because, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, he fucked up in Liquid. He messed it up big time with the hires. He was the one saying that he went out and he had full freedom. He was doing the scouting for all the players and all of that. So we can't just pretend that he's got nothing to do with the failures of that team, but that doesn't mean that he hasn't gained valuable experience to bring into FaZe and still be one of the best players in the world, right? Maybe he's not quite ready to be the in-game leader. Maybe he's ready to be a second IGL to someone that he respects like Carrigan and then be the star of the show. And I still feel like Twistzz, at least at that event, he made me believe that he's still one of the best riflers in the world. I feel like I hadn't seen that type of a performance out of Twistzz in a very long time, especially the Mirage map against Vitality was absolutely crazy. But I still think that he can be a difference maker in a way that he couldn't be a couple years ago. He was still that guy sometimes, but now I feel like it's a lot more, it could be a lot more consistent. Obviously, this is just one event we're talking about, right? It's a pretty small sample size. The vibes were probably immaculate after winning the first best of threes, and the fact that there's no pressure and you're playing with Rain and it's fun and no one's going to be disappointed if you lose. So there's a lot of external factors to it, but I still feel like there's a lot to get out of it. And I'm actually going to use that opportunity to self-advertise because I did write an article about Twistz's story, leaving FaZe, going through Liquid, all the things there, and now rejoining, and all the initial ideas or the initial opinions that the players had about him. And I posted it on Skin Club just a couple days ago, so you guys can go and check it out. But yeah, I'm excited for this FaZe lineup. I'm really excited for Twistzz. I really am. And I'm happy that I feel like for FaZe, this is kind of a long-term investment bringing Twistzz back. Because I could see Twistzz in a couple of years becoming the in-game leader of FaZe whenever Carrigan decides that it's time to step down or the team decides that it's time for him to step down. I can really see that happen.
He goes coach mode.
Yeah, imagine how sick that would be.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, that could be definitely exciting for the future. I think that's what FaZe are focusing on, right? Is the
Sure.
future. I think they realize, Rain's getting a little bit older. Maybe his contracts are around the corner. It's going to run out. Maybe they don't want to lose him. And I think when you got Twistzz in, as far as I'm aware, it's a swap directly with Elige
Yeah.
to Liquid. So they're not really wanting to spend a huge amount of money. So I think bringing Jacob in is a cheaper option. Young player. A lot of the FaZe players are saying that Jacob is a player that can learn a lot. He's like a sponge. He's just listening. He's not problematic. He's willing to try and change and do things like that. So I think they can kind of mold him to fit the FaZe system. So I think that's somewhat exciting about the future. Obviously, everyone wants to see Rain play. We're a big fan of Rain and exactly what he did within this FaZe clan. But
Yeah, give him the helicopter. Sign him up, BC Game.
There has to be a point where you move on. And I really like what Rain said in an interview. He's like, of course, I enjoyed playing with FaZe again, but, there's got to be some sort of future outside of FaZe. Your whole career can't be defined by one team, and he doesn't want that. So he's excited to go try something new. I think he's deserved it, earned it. So looking forward to that. Would have liked to see one more major with him, but not to be. So we'll see what FaZe Clan can do. I just hope they can replicate some of the success they have with Rain at Pro League and be as exciting to watch as they were there with Jacob, and I do think so. I think eventually they will be.
Okay. I think that's a good end topic for this one. Unless you have something else that you really wanna shout out. Obviously, there's a lot of teams that we can speak about, but I feel like we covered the main storylines.
No, I'm pretty good. I think those are all the storylines that were really intriguing over the last few weeks of Counter-Strike and the next few weeks to come.
Yeah. There's a couple events going on right now. There's the CS Asia Championship in Thunderpick, but it's day 1 at Thunderpick, and day 2 or day 3 it's CS Asia. So not too much to unpack there. And yeah, this is going to be how we put an end to it. Obviously, big shout out to AceZone as well, the main partners of this entire podcast. If you want to get yourselves hooked up with the best headsets in esports and the headsets that all the players are using on like 90% of the tier 1 events, you can go and check them out. And yeah, thank you for coming, Dinko. It was an absolute blast, and you can go and check out his podcast, Post Plan, right? I remember correctly. Okay, you can go. Yeah, you can go and check out the Post Plan with Dinko and Henry, and you can go and follow Dinko on socials. And yeah, are you up to any other content, or that's about it? Do we have anything else to plug?
Dude, I was filming some vlogs earlier this year, but those things are hard to keep up. And get tired to go to event to event, but I'll be getting back to those. I have a Dallas one, and that's probably a little bit too old now. But I'm gonna be doing more vlog content in the future, so that'll be something over my YouTube channel.
Okay, you're gonna be bringing people over to the gym with you, 5 a.m. for the runs.
Exactly. Yes, before the CAC broadcast starts. Yeah.
All right, lovely. Okay, thank you everyone for watching. Make sure you leave us a like, subscribe to the channel, go and check out AceZone, go and check out Dinko and the Post Plan podcast with Henry, and we're gonna see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.